number up. There it is, 33. Today I'm just going to play a live video that's happening right now. This being Sunday the 18th of the 2nd, 24. It's Jason something or other from Archaix. Links are in the description. And I'll just start playing him and you can see for yourself what he's got to say. Quite interesting stuff. Just give a bit of volume.
So let me share my. I don't need to share my screen for anything, do I? No. Good. All right, let's go. Let's see here. So it's very curious to me that in 1901 was the first year that the U.S. government finally established a scientific cabinet to begin recording the regularity of natural disasters. Why did they wait till 1901 to start recording natural disasters when the 1800s was absolutely packed full of all kinds of very highly local, terrible events? Yeah, this whole shelf back here, I got a whole shelf, all these books right here. All these are all books. Here's Galveston, 1900, Hurricane Galveston. The 1800, all the events in the 1800s all in the 1800, all the disasters. This right here, the San Francisco Horror. Now, these books are all well over 100 years old. All these books right here. Let's see. What is this? This is this is the story of the Great Earthquake of 1908. 1897, the Columbian Exposition, 1893, and how it was destroyed. All right. Here's a different book on the San Francisco Horror. Here's a different book on the San Francisco Horror. All these are 1906. So, all right. Now, I'm going to be reading from three books. Right here. I'm going to read from these three books. All three of these books were published in 1902 because the publishers were trying to get this out to the American people as fast as possible. The events that happened in 1902 happened rapidly, and there's my word, they are harrowing. People could not believe what had happened. I'm also going to tell you now, a lot of this information in this video comes from these three books, all 122 years old. This is In the Shadow of Death, Martinique. This book was published in 1902. This is an original edition. This book was published in 1902. This is original edition. It's about two different volcanoes in 1902. This one is terrible. It was published in 1902. I'm taking data out of all three of these books today. And let me tell you something. What happened sucked. I ain't gonna lie. It sucked. So in 1901, the U.S. government suddenly begins a scientific cabinet that's sole duty is to begin recording the regularity of natural disasters. They did this right before 1902. 1901, the U.S. government, U.S. President William McKinley is assassinated and is succeeded by Theodore Roosevelt. Now, I'm not going into these details. I'm just going to tell you on the surface right now. If you want to know more about this history, you need to go to Archaix TV and look at my Hats Off series. But just for YouTube, it's safe enough on YouTube for me to talk about. Listen, most people don't know, but the United States has been a captured operation since the year 1902. 1901, the last true American president was assassinated, William McKinley. every single American president since then has been working for the Bolsheviks. 100%. It was a Jewish takeover of the United States of America, and it's in full effect. Right after that, they took the Federal Reserve. Right after that, they went up and funded World War I. They funded World War II, Nuremberg trials. They funded the Vietnam War. Listen, man, guys, it goes deep. It goes deep, but it's not the subject matter of this video. This video is just showing you that just like in ancient times when the phoenix appeared, the mandate of heaven changed and rulership of the world was given to another people, was given to a different family of the elite. This is what happened in 1902. And in order for that to have been a smooth transition, they had to get rid of William McKinley. And they did it really dastardly too. 2 gunshots to the stomach and 1 in the groin. They made sure he died. He died a few days later. But William McKinley was the last true autonomous United States president. So as soon as he was gone, Theodore Roosevelt. Anybody doesn't know, if you don't know the pedigree of Theodore Roosevelt, you need to go to Archaix TV. So here's the real sinister thing about this is that as soon as William McKinley is removed, the new U.S. president enacts the U.S. Treasury Department's Secret Service to now begin providing presidential protection because President McKinley was shot. So the perpetrators that killed the true president now create a secret service to protect themselves. Wow. And it all came to pass in 1902. Massive power shift. So, (1901) new inventions of the modern age. Suddenly, in 1901, the assembly line is invented by Ransom Eli Olds in making the curved dash Oldsmobile. Now, don't get this confused. A lot of you want to point toward Henry Ford as creating the assembly line, and it's not true. Oldsmobile. Eli Olds created the assembly line, but the difference was the Oldsmobile line was a fixed line, and humans moved along the line to build the cars. Henry Ford changed it up to a conveyor belt system where humans worked stations, and the pieces that came to them to work on. A significant difference here. He improved a system that was actually created in 1901. So, also in 1901, something that you're all familiar with, fluorescent lighting was invented by the American Peter Cooper Hewitt. We've all heard of Hewitt. The name Hewitt's on our washers, dryers, on our vacuums. We got Hewitt on our generators. We got Hewitt everywhere. It was called a mercury vapor lamp. 1901, instant coffee is invented. Powdered coffee is invented. And then they begin to manufacture it immediately in 1902. Instant coffee. It's crazy. It was invented by a Japanese-American chemist, Satoru Kato of Chicago. In 1901, Hans Bellamy is born. Why is that necessary? Why is that interesting? My Archaix veterans know the name Bellamy. Hans Bellamy. His fascinating works were all Phoenix related, and he never even knew anything about the Phoenix. He documents all these cataclysms, all these changes in calendars. He's amazing, Hans Bellamy, but not once does he mention the Phoenix. He had no idea that what he was documenting was an actual phenomenon that could be dated with predictive value. So he wrote books called Moons, Myths, and Man, the Book of Revelation, History, Built Before the Flood. He wrote a book called In the Beginning. He wrote another book called The Atlantis Myth. In the Atlantis myth, he explains the cosmic causes of the Great Flood and even calculates that the Maya were familiar with a 2,760-year cycle. 2,760 years is perfectly divisible by 138. It's also exactly 5 Phoenix cycles of 552 years. Hans Bellamy seems to have been born right at the right time to just be saturated with all this Phoenix data, because that's what he did. He spent his life writing all these books about the Phoenix phenomenon without ever mentioning the Phoenix. 1901, in the month of May, Gulf Oil is founded. Thank you, Delta Dawn. Excuse me.
Technical issues once more, folks.
1901 is also noted. Not one single volcano erupted in 1901. Oh, 1903, there's only one documented volcano, but it was under the ice in Iceland. Not much is known about it, and it was a small eruption. That was in 1903. 1902 is a different story. So, with 1901, I'm going to play you this little video real quick, because we're going to move right along. I told you guys, be patient. This is a 3-hour presentation, no doubt. All right, so I'm going to stop that screen, present, video file. Let's see here. February 22nd, 1901, a new star appeared in the heavens in the Perseus constellation, seen by Americans, Europeans, and as far as Kiev in Russia, all northern hemisphere. Astronomers asserted that a spectrographic analysis revealed that this new star to be 300 light years away, and the newspapers picked up the story. But to the embarrassment of the astronomers, the newly appeared celestial body shot out nebulous rings that moved at a rate of 2 and 3 seconds of arc a day. This far exceeded the speed of light, demonstrating that the object was much closer to the Earth than the astronomers had believed. In his book, New Lands, Charles Fort wrote, when the new star in Perseus appeared in February 1901, it was just a point of light. Something went out from it, giving it 6 months a diameter equal to half of the apparent diameter of the moon. The appearances looked structural. Ford believed the dusts of 1901 and 1902 that fell on Earth from space came from this object. He notes that 3 years earlier, Dr. Epson, on January 16, 1898, observed something that looked like a cloud in the constellation Perseus. Dr. Epson wrote, whatever it was, it had the peculiar property of dimming and blotting out the stars. It moved into Perseus, and then it moved away. On March 10, 1901, only 16 days after the appearance of this object in the sky, a great amount of red dust fell from the sky on Sicily, Tunis, Italy, Germany, and Russia. A thick orange-red stain was reported from Ongar, Essex, England. In Austria, while the dust fell, the earth quaked. On March 11th, as dust rained on Tunis, earthquakes afflicted Algeria. On March 12th, ashes fell from the sky at Avellino, Italy. A new star in Perseus. Dust rains on the earth. Academia is quiet. There is a mention here of Avellino in Italy. For those who don't know, in 1687 BC, a massive amount of Italy was totally buried around Vesuvius. Herculaneum and Pompeii were buried by Vesuvius in 79 AD, but archaeologists later in the 70s and 80s found out that those burials were top of another substrata of a more ancient civilization that had been buried before them, and they have dated it at 1700 BC, which is an approximate. That approximate is a scientific bullseye for the Igan deluge, which was 1687 BC. The Avellino, it's called the Avellino eruption, which is what I found it interesting because it's talking about the red dust that blanketed Avellino. Now, in these video clips I'm showing, there are a lot of events in 1902 that are in the video, but I'm not discussing those. You can stop and screenshot those, but there's a lot I just can't get to, but they're in these little video clips. So, Mob Syndicate, Harley Davidson's 1903. You got 1901 here. But yeah, let's move on. Okay, we're gonna take that off the stage. All right, moving right along. All right, let me get over here. Lot of stuff to collate, guys. I'm sorry. So, 1902 begins, and we're gonna launch 1902 off with relevant discoveries in archaeology. Let me explain. All throughout my channel, I show you that because we live in a hologram, because we live in a construct that's based on holographic principles, we are always going to find these amazing gems, these cross-calendrical parallels. We're gonna find the unfolding of historical events are always patterned by antecedents. We're gonna find things like in 1902, because 1902 is attached to the Phoenix phenomenon every 138 years, then it's amazing. It's amazing that we find in the discoveries by archaeologists things that were destroyed, buried, or connected to the events of the Phoenix phenomenon on those past 138-year events. It's amazing. First of all, in 1902, excavations at Nineveh in Assyria began, and it was the Nineveh tablets that told us about the pin deity, and how it appeared, and later it was called the Phoenix. But it's the Assyrian libraries that were later buried in a Phoenix cataclysm, totally buried. It's the reason they were preserved. It's the reason why we have 250 to 260,000 cuneiform tablets from the Near East today, because the entire area was buried in mud and fallout from the sky. Had that not have happened, then those libraries would have been raided and destroyed by enemies. It didn't happen. They were all perfectly preserved. So this is the excavations begin at Nineveh in Assyria, but they just begin there. They spread out rapidly throughout the Near East from 1902 onward. So excavations of the destruction of Minoan Crete at Phaistos was unearthed. So this is important because Phaistos was destroyed in 1687 BC. This is the origin of the famous Phaistos disc. You've seen the disc with the spiral of symbols that goes around. They still claim it's undecipherable, but it is scientifically dated at 17. The destruction is at 1700 BC. Again, a scientific bullseye for the Ogygian flood caused by the Phoenix in 1687 BC. And remember, the Ogygian deluge started with what? Red mud, red rain, red dust, fallout all over the world. The sun went dark, the moon was red, terrible earthquakes, then the flooding started. So, the Phaistos disc, I'm real eager for somebody to translate that. I would really like to know what it is, since it's one of the only writings that came out of that period. So that's the Phaistos disc. So in 1902, so it's interesting that Phaistos, which was destroyed in 1687 BC, would be excavated in 1902. another phoenix year. And again, a farmer plowing a field near La Majora in the mountains of Veracruz state discovered the Tuxtla statuette. This is famous. It's Tuxtla statuette, later acquired by the Smithsonian Institution. A squat, bullet-shaped human with a duck bill and wings covered in 75 Epi-Olmec glyphs. Its own inscribed long date calendar date is March 162 Common Era. In our calendar, it would be the year 162. Now, this is in 1902, this was the oldest long count date ever found. 162 is very interesting. Remember, calendars are self-referencing and cross-calendrical parallels are found everywhere. What I mean is, I'm going to have to show you a chart real quick for you to understand how important this discovery was, what it means. So let's present. Share screen. I talk about this artifact in my Nuna files, but I also have it here. Let me find it for you. There's so much stuff. There's so much stuff around here. All right, here we go. I don't know. Okay, here we go. That's it. All right. I know you guys have seen this chart before. The red spheres at the top are all the Phoenix dates. Huge destructions and then just regional ones. Those are the red. The black ones underneath that are all Nemesis X object. The yellow bars are all, yellow-green bars right there are all Mayan long count dates. You can see the 404 cursed Earth system, the Phoenix deals right here, 414 in the middle. Every 414 years is a cursed Earth period under the Phoenix system. Now, what I'm drawing to your attention here is Nemesis X object right here appeared in 162. You see, it's on this chart. We have data for the destruction and the sighting in 162 of the Nemesis X object. Here's where it appeared. The very next appearance was in 522, the same year and the only year in all world history that both the Nemesis X object and Phoenix were right here. Were in the sky at the same time. But before that, in 162, we have the Nemesis X object. It's on a 792-year periodicity. Right there. That is the date of that object that was found. But it was found here in 1902, toward the end of the Phoenix calendar. The Phoenix system, the Phoenix holography is calendrical, and the Nemesis X timeline is calendrical. And here they are. We find here we have a data point that references each other. One is the date on the artifact and when it disappeared, and the other is when the artifact was excavated, and it references back to this date. We have a lot of these little, you can call them coincidences if you want, but after a while throughout this video, you're going to have to admit when, too many coincidences exhibits no coincidence at all. You can only find so many of these before you're like overwhelmed with them. All right. Let me get back to where I was. I need to stop screen. All right. So that was all. Now, another thing that's interesting about it is that this Olmec statuette has a duck bill, a bullet-shaped skull, squat, and has wings. This is almost like Pazuzu, the Assyrian demon, which also called terraform, little statues of the Anunnaki. So that's pretty interesting. Now that 162 date is not just the appearance of the Nemesis X object. That 162 date is also perfectly on the Anunnaki Ner chronology. Archaix veterans know what I'm talking about. Every 600 years is a Ner. 162 AD is the 600th year of a Ner, and then it switches over to another one. You can't make this stuff up. So this one artifact actually bridges three different timekeeping systems. One involves the Phoenix, one involves the Nemesis X object, and one involves the Anunnaki. It's very interesting. Thank you, Carol. It's all about that 1902 today, guys. So here's a really interesting one. 2239 BC, the day the sky fell, collapse of the vapor canopy, the traditions of Noah and the ark, it's the great flood. But what happens in 1902, which is another Phoenix year? George Hagopian, an Armenian, was taken up to the summit of Mount Ararat in Turkey at a time when the ice cap was greatly diminished. He personally beheld the remains of a gigantic wooden ship constructed of vast timbers, so old they were virtually petrified. His descriptions matched the reports of others on the structure's color, dimensions, architectural features, and location. At over 12,000 feet elevation, entombed in ice. I've done a lot of research on. I have several books in here on Noah's Ark and all the different discoveries. President Jimmy Carter, his Air Force One was diverted so President Jimmy Carter could actually see it on the side of Mount Ararat. CIA satellites have taken pictures of it. The first expedition, this is 1902, shortly after this was reported by George Hagopian, the Romanovs in Russia dispatched a scientific team, and they took measurements, they took pictures, they took reels, they photographed everything, and they brought all of that back to Moscow. Unfortunately, this was 1916 when they went on their expedition. When they came back, none of them were ever heard from again. All that information was completely taken from them, and it vanished. The Jewish Bolsheviks had taken over Russia, which was a Christian empire under the Romanovs, and they executed the Romanov family. All the archives, all the scientific, all that stuff was destroyed. All the libraries were burned throughout Russia, except for selected works. And then the Bolsheviks turned around and they got writers, Jewish writers from all over the world, and they commissioned them, and they literally filled Russia up with a whole bunch of new versions of history, according to the Bolsheviks. And we lost all that information on that structure. Now, do I believe it was Noah's Ark? I don't know. I don't know. Because in my research, I have already promoted to you guys that I have found references that there wasn't a single ark, there was fleets of arks, and that one might have been just one that was found. And the whole story of Noah was attached to the one relic that was found when it really wasn't Noah's Ark. I don't know. I just don't know. So, that was George Hagobian. So that's 1902, though. A Phoenix year. So we have the holography is self-referencing. Things that happened on Phoenix years seem to be connected to events in time and space in 1902. 1902 is very interesting. It's not just an ordinary Phoenix year. It's actually the beginning of something else, and we'll get to that. But in 1902, Sir Norman Lockyer's research on Stonehenge is completed. He finishes his reports. His measurements were taken in 1901. By 1902, he finishes reports and releases them to the scientific community. The work is titled Stonehenge and Other British Stone Monuments, where he relates that the monument was erected for astronomical purposes and that all the evidence suggests that Stonehenge was a calendar for a different type of system we don't understand today. But one thing that came out of the measurements and the Stonehenge research is very interesting. This was 1902, but it was published that Stonehenge and the heel stone is oriented to draw attention to the month of May. Archaix veterans know where this is going. 1902, on Malta, Archaix is discovered. Galleries and chambers of rock carved out of limestone dating from the Great Destruction, 2239 BC, when the Mediterranean was created almost in a single day when the Strait of Gibraltar broke. That was the Phoenix cataclysm of the collapse of the vapor canopy, 2239 BC. That is what destroyed Malta, the Gigantia Temple, the Archaix, all these things on Malta. Giant 20 to 80-ton blocks on Malta were blown by the tsunami a quarter of a mile, and they have been found offshore. David Hatcher Childers goes into a lot of detail. You can see from the megalithic distribution of the distribution of megaliths all over Malta, and in the water, you can see where the tsunami came and how it just washed all this stuff off the island. It's very interesting. But here it is, 1902, and something that was destroyed by the Great Flood is suddenly discovered. 1902, in the month of May, 1902, archaeologists first noticed a metal wheel in a lump of pressed debris that later came to be known as the Antikythera computer. It was discovered in 1901 by sponge divers off of Crete, off a little island called Antikythera. Now, no one knew what it was. It was just part of the shipwreck. But in 1902, somebody actually set it aside and started looking at it, and they realized it had gears in it. Came under scrutiny. The highly complex device had been excavated from wreckage under the Mediterranean, a 300-ton ship on its way to Rome, loaded with the plunder from the Third Mithridatic War. Told you guys a lot about the Poison King, King Mithridates IV, who took on Rome, and the great mysterious rock that fell from the sky that stopped him from beating the Romans' asses. Remember that? So this ship had been sunk around 60 to 70 BC. It was publicly announced in 1902 that the Antikythera device was indeed a sophisticated geared computer older than 2,000 1,000 years used to chart astronomical orbital periods of the moon, sun, and planets, both forward and backward in time. This is important. Remember, this computer device that was over 2,000 years old is designed to compute periods of time, both backward and forward in time. And it was discovered, this was discovered in 1902. I can't hammer that in more because you're about to see some more stuff that's perfectly relative to the backward and forward in time phenomenon. You know this, I call it calendrical isometrics. So incredibly complex is the mechanism with its precision cut differential gear systems that it is evident that the technology required to manufacture the metal computer is more sophisticated than the mechanism itself. The computer was constructed sometime after 713 BC because it employs a 365.24 day year. Now, Zechariah Sitchin remarks that the pointer on the relic, there's a pointer on the relic that shows its true purpose. The pointer on the relic, according to Zechariah Sitchin, is 586 BC. But he's wrong. Excuse me, it's going to be 584 BC. But he's wrong because Zechariah Sitchin, who is Jewish, was trying to associate this sophisticated device to the fall of Jerusalem in 585 BC. He's wrong. Now, the scientist, Dr. Derek De Sola Price, who spent 20 years studying this mechanism, he x-rayed it, took it apart, he built replicas of it. He says the pointer was close to 586 BC. Now, I believe both are wrong simply because it was designed to measure astronomical events forward and backward in time, and there is nothing in 586 or 584 that would there's no eclipses, there's nothing that would make those dates stand out. However, in 583 BC, we have the phoenix darken the sun, and this is in the historical record. It's the reason why Thales of Miletus was named one of the 7 wise men of Greece, because 2 years before it happened, Thales predicted that the sun was going to go dark, and it did, and he wasn't predicting an eclipse. Eclipses were well known by Herodotus, who records the story, and Plutarch. They knew all about eclipses, and they told many eclipse scenarios enough. But when it comes to the darkening of the sun of 583 BC, it was something else. It's on the 138-year timeline. It's also started calendars like the Pythian calendar. But anyway, in the 1st century BC, according to Cicero, these amazing computer astrolabs existed, and ancient Greek and Roman authors even attributed Thales of Miletus as having built astrolabs that helped them predict events. This is an historical record. In 1902, they found one. So, let's see, Ammianus Marcellinus, Marcus Marcellinus possessed one of these astrolabs, which demonstrated the motion of the sun, the moon, the planets, and it was made in Sicily at Syracuse. And Cicero, in the 1st century BC, claims it was a very ancient invention and that a similar model was located at Rome. So and let's see, I got notes on, in fact, Thales of Miletus and Archimedes were believed to be the builders of these devices. Yeah, that's why I say it's 583, guys. 583 was a Phoenix phenomenon day, and it makes sense of the Antikythera computer. But another reason why I believe that it was designed to predict Phoenix episodes every 138 years is because it was discovered in 1902, a Phoenix year. Remember, these things in our holography are self-referencing, and you're going to see a whole lot more evidence of that right here in this video. 1902. Archaeology in Egypt. The Egyptian Antiquities Service, headed by Gaston Maspero, total criminal. He organized a multinational coalition of missions that would, in different groups, excavate the Giza complex and Sphinx, as well as other temple pyramid sites throughout Egypt. He highly compartmentalized all the study of Egypt. He even had disciplinary measures set in place for any type of cross-contamination, such as anybody cross-referencing. He didn't want an archaeological team to find things that he couldn't control before the word got out that certain things were found. This is what he was doing. He was censoring. 1902. In the Near East, in Assyria, the code of Hammurabi of Babylon, dedicated to the Anunnaki, is excavated. This is the code of Hammurabi. 1902. Director Major John Wesley of the Smithsonian Institute. It's his 23rd and final year. Also over the U.S. Bureau of Ethnology. He dies. So he dies in 1902. But during his tenure, since 1879 to 1902, countless anomalous American artifacts sent to the Smithsonian under his care completely vanished. Over and over and over and over throughout newspapers, microfiche, published books, everywhere, private letters, everywhere in the 1880s. In the 1880s, 1890s, all the way up to 1901, there are complaints about all these amazing finds that were sent to the Smithsonian, and then there was just silenced. It was later found out that Director Wesley had decommissioned, he had purchased decommissioned ships, packed them with artifacts, and sank them in the Atlantic. Yeah, guys, that's insane. So, yeah, Shiva, I get it. Smithsonian Institute. So, 1902, we are also visited with the sudden appearance of new translations of ancient works. R.H. Charles, his translation of the Book of Enoch is famous, published in 1902. And then Fleming has a translation of the Ethiopic Book of Enoch, published at Leipzig. Dr. Fleming's translation is based on 15 ancient manuscripts of the Book of Enoch. Here's two different translations of the Book of Enoch, both of them good, both of them still very popular and number one sellers on the markets. Both of them appeared in 1902. And we all know, Archaix veterans, we all know the connections between Enoch and the Phoenix. Oh, and Enoch and the Great Pyramid. But we'll get to the Great Pyramid here in a little while, because it is relative to 1902. Enoch's book declares that its contents were not for his generation, but were for a far future generation. I'm going to quote him. He says, I understood what I saw, but not for this generation, but for a remote one, which is for to come. Also in 1902, the ancient Babylonian Enuma Elish is published and translated. The cuneiform 7 tablets of creation from which we got our modern book of Genesis from. At least the creation account. It's published, translated into English straight from the Akkadian in 1902. So these tablet records concern the primordial restoration of Earth as it begins a new life. After a previous destruction. Tiamat is slain. So the Enuma Elish text venerate here's another weird connection to 1902. The Enuma Elish text venerate the Anunnaki. In the Enuma Elish, it reads that our world was covered in blood of the slain dragon Tiamat in the beginning. The renovation of our world is from the blood of a slain dragon. Well, Phoenix was called the sky dragon in ancient times, and every time it appeared, it rained red torrential rains, red mud, and red dust, all depending upon the relative humidity all over the world. So this Enuma Elish that talks about the world being covered in the blood of the slain dragon Tiamat, it's all here, guys, in 1902, a Phoenix year. This appears. 1902, Budge and King publish the Annals of the Kings of Assyria, wherein is read in the records of King Ashurbanipal II of the location of Mount Nasir, where Napishtim's ship came to rest after the flood, according to the Epic of Gilgamesh. Wow. 1902, George Hagopian of Armenia goes up to Mount Ararat and finds this giant structure. Russians go out there after that, and they go measure it, and they do all this stuff. 1902, an ancient text found underground that's over 3,000 years old is translated into the English language in 1902 that talks about that very structure on that very mountain concerning the flood and Noah. The parallels the coincidences just keep piling up. 1902, modernist movement, higher criticism begins. Welcome, Robert Porter. Historians in 1902 began digging deep into the Christian histories, and they began to expose forgeries, falsified documents, and many interpolations into secular writings from the antiquity committed by the church translators and copyists, meaning whole portions of documents that the church said were original were actually forgeries, and older documents were incorporated word for word. I found many of them, guys. A matter of fact, the whole sun darkening episode in Earthquake when Jesus was on the cross was all stolen from a historian named Trallas of Bithynia. He had already wrote about the Phoenix phenomenon in either 31, it was either 31 or 168 BC, he had recorded one of those in Bithynia. Those documents were taken. So was the Phoenix phenomenon episode of Nicodemus when he's Pontius Pilate's report to Tiberius Caesar. In that forged document, we have a whole Phoenix phenomenon related about the sun darkening, and all these are older Phoenix documents that the church took, rewrote, incorporated into their forged documents, trying to establish the veracity of Christianity to an unbelieving world. And this in 1902, these started getting exposed. So many scholars were in on this, exposing all these old church forgeries as being total BS, that the Roman Catholic supremacy was threatened, and in response to the brilliant works of these scholars bringing to light all these fallacies, Pope Leo XIII created the Pontifical Biblical Commission to oversee the works of all theological scholars, to make sure they did not stray from the teachings of the official church papal censorship. You can't make this stuff up. 1902. 1902, German Assyriologist Frederick Delitzsch delivered a lecture before the Kaiser in German court concerning biblical history in light of the new cuneiform Assyrian writings that were being translated at that time. Books, speeches, pamphlets, articles, letters resulted a fury of dissidents from both biblical believers and higher critics. Delitzsch claimed that much of the Old Testament writings were borrowed from ancient Babylonian stories and Assyrian stories. He was absolutely correct. This is 1902. However, the world wasn't ready to receive that. The people who believed the Bible wanted to believe it was 100% the Word of God and all the stories were true. The academics wanted to believe that all the stories that are found in the traditions of Assyrian Babylon was just purely mythological, and they did not support the Bible at all. So, yeah, he showed that there's actually a compromise here, but they weren't trying to hear it. Just weren't trying to hear it in 1902. 1902, Chauncey Brewster Tinker translated the epic poem Beowulf from the Old English language, Anglo-Saxon, into modern English. His book was titled Beowulf, translated out of the Old English.
Brain's sort of gone a bit funky, but you can still hear it.
Beowulf is an amazing story. It's all about Sigurd, the giant slave.
Well, Archaix seems to have you have an issue. So see if I can do it another way. Try and open another page. See if it'll work on that. But at the moment, you're just looking at me.
Player in Beowulf and Hrothgar and the Danes. It's got stories of the old world, giant animals.
Well, it should take a couple of minutes, and beautiful to play some music at the same time, wouldn't it? Yeah, but the way things are going, it's not looking good. You can go really, really slow, because this computer is really, really slow. So I might stop now, and I might restart when I get it all going again. Till then, folks, this is Amos Sewn. Here's an email address. Sunday Sewn 33. Yep, it's just not working, folks. I'll restart it shortly. In the meantime, be good to each other, eh? It's going to happen. Cheers, folks.